many times in my little COVID missives in the mornings, science will save us. The scientific community, and in our law firm, we represent a lot of the startups and also the larger pharmaceutical developers and manufacturers. They have been on it. The scientific community has been on it, and you're much less likely to die now if you get COVID. But in terms of preventing this disease, this infection, you've heard it over and over again: social distance, wear masks, wash your hands. Until we get a vaccine proliferated, which will be a while, we have to do that. And it has had a profound effect on all of us, on our lives, on our business lives, on our jobs, on our family relationships. And dealing with that is the signal challenge of this coming year.
You address in the report this morning the 2 or 3 pauses that some of the clinical trials are going through. They've gotten a lot of attention, and you do address that actually in some ways that's a good sign that the pauses are occurring. Can you talk about that a minute?
Clinical trials are normal. Pausing them is normal. They are intended to ferret out the unintended consequences of something that should otherwise be good for you. And so we had one pause yesterday, one the day before, one a month ago on both therapeutics and on 2 of the vaccines. And that's good, because it means that the FDA and the companies are taking this seriously, and that's all to protect us. So, as I said, I never believed, and I don't think anybody who really knows anything ever believed, that we were going to snap our fingers and in October have vaccines that were fully vetted and available to everyone. It'll take a while, but having said that, if we do get a vaccine in the first quarter or the second quarter of 2021, that will be a remarkable feat for the scientific community.
You also address what was on the front page, I think, of the Post this morning, which is the discussions that appear to be going on in the White House about herd immunity and whether that is a realistic option. What can you bring to us about that discussion?
I'm going to give you a very measured statement. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
10 to 20% or 10 to 15%, which is what some of the people who are advocating this are saying, does not provide herd immunity. You need about 85% of the population either to have gotten the infection or to have been successfully vaccinated. And we're not there. Countries that, the UK in the beginning decided to try to get herd immunity and gave up when its hospital system was just overwhelmed. That's what would happen if you just ignored all the public health experts. So not happening. Now, the same people who are advocating for that we have herd immunity are also saying that's a reason not to shut down completely. And interestingly, I think most health experts are saying we don't need to shut down across the board. We need to, my husband, whom Bill mentioned, describes the disease right now, the infections right now as popcorn, popping up in different places. And you need to deal with the places in which the infections are popping up. We don't need, I don't think most people think we need to shut down across the board.
Jamie, you have a sense, and I know that while the numbers in Germany are going up a little bit, and we would be considering it to be quite successful. Germany is a pretty dense country. I've been there a lot. Frankfurt and Berlin are not New York, but they're real cities. The infection hit there actually before it hit here. What accounts for the fact that their mortality numbers are, I think, about 25% on a per capita basis of ours. And frankly, I believe Germany is better on a per capita basis than all but maybe 5 states in this country in terms of deaths per million.
They're doing
what have they done?
testing. Yeah, Bill, they're doing testing and tracing, and then they're dealing in a pretty aggressive way with the places where there are these explosions of infection. We let it get out of control because we didn't take the aggressive moves that Germany took at the get-go, and therefore tracing is nearly impossible. You can't trace massive numbers of infected people at the same time. So, you know, they followed the advice that our public health officials were giving us that we didn't follow.
Let me pivot a bit. As I said, you are on the Amazon board, which may give you as good an insight to the American economy as anyone, including Jay Powell or Secretary Mnuchin, may have. How is the economy doing? Obviously you're not going to breach confidentiality, but what's your sense of the outlook? This is a bankruptcy college, as various folks said. As many bankruptcies there have been in the past 4 or 5 months, it's fewer than people expected, I think in part because of what the government did do in March, but a lot of concern about what will happen next year. So what can you share with us on that?
Well, I'd be happy to. And if there's noise in the background and it's bothering people, just let me know and I'll ask maybe I'm going to do this anyway. I'll be right back.
Okay. And I will take this opportunity to say that if folks do have questions, if you direct them to me on the chat function at the bottom, I will be try to get to them as well. So you know, we thought we'd do it by writing out questions if people have them. So if you do have questions, send them on the chat, and I will try to ask them. Jamie.
So I think honestly that the bankruptcy bar is going to be very busy, and the reason is that we have, in the first instance, a K-shaped recovery. I think the White House thought we would have a V-shaped recovery, then it was a U, then it was a swoosh, then it was an upside down pi sign. A K recovery describes businesses that are doing well, very well, and businesses that are not doing well. And the latter category are principally service businesses. So Bill, you're in your old law firm, my current law firm. We're functioning pretty darn well virtually. The people who work in the cafeterias in our offices are not. The people who work in the restaurants near our offices are not. The people who clean offices and maintain them are not. And both those companies and the people who work for them they were carried in the first instance by you know, it's not stimulus, it's aid. And our political system has been unable, really astoundingly, to re-up that aid. And therefore you're seeing people who are hanging on by their fingernails. And then of course there are the industries like airlines and others that, you know, can't function in a COVID environment, or can't function fully. So without assistance, they also are laying off people. So that's the story. I have been astounded at the degree to which the stock market and the real economy have diverged. I mean, I understand that the stock market isn't the real economy, but there's a lot of reason for worry out there. A company like Amazon, I mean, we've seen it. People are turning to it because it can deliver reliably goods that people need, and they don't have to go out.
What is the hope for a you know, whether it's airlines, the hotel business, the Madison Square Garden, are they truly going to be in a position that until there is a vaccine that has got something close to herd immunity, that there's really not much they can do to turn things around?
This isn't about mandated shutdowns. This is about what your own judgment would tell you to do. If you were told today you could jam yourselves, you and Terry, into a Broadway theater, you wouldn't go. Correct. So until we get the infection rate down, until we get some form of herd immunity, until we do all the things that the experts have been telling us to do, massive indoor gatherings with people shouting or clapping or laughing hard are not happening. And so the outlook for those enterprises is not good until we do the things that we need to do.
What's your sense about the banking system? I recently left it. My honest assessment was that it was in much better shape at the end of last year than it was 5 years before. That the changes that came out of Dodd-Frank were more effective in that they actually did improve capital and simplified banking. There is a sense I'm hearing that because of the willingness of the regulators, which I think was maybe in the CARES Act or one of the other pieces of legislation that allowed the banks not to have to treat as non-performing certain of the loans that maybe to the companies we were talking about, that we are, I've heard people say, and I referred to Epic in my comments earlier, which was a case that frankly, had it gone the other way, would have led to the S&L crisis being 3 years before it was. Are we postponing the inevitable on some of the banks at this point?
I think the banks are in general in pretty good shape, in part because the Fed has purchased every asset on earth. I mean, it is completely shoring up entities that would otherwise be considered non-performing. I understand why the Fed is doing that, and it has lessened the pain, the immediate pain in our society, but there's a price to pay for it. If you ever marked to market, if you will, the assets that the Fed has purchased, it would really be ugly. And there's no limit to it. I mean, the amount of money that it has spent to purchase these assets would make a bankruptcy lawyer blush. I mean, this group, maybe more than any, should understand the impact of the Fed's intervention in the market. And so you really have two worlds. You have a world in which, my technical term, crappy assets are being bought by the federal government. And then you have people who work in the service economy who have nothing, who have no assistance whatsoever. And the two in tandem will make for a very challenging 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I was going to say, and beyond. And if you were, asked to serve in a senior economic position in the next administration or on the Fed, where does it end? What does the Fed do with trillions of dollars of loans that, as you said, have not been marked to market? The Fed isn't really normally in this position. They were in 2008 with Bear Stearns and some of the others, and it turned out basically okay. But on the other hand, interest rates never, got to what we would consider to be a normal level, and we're now facing the issue of a lower bound if we're not going to go to negative interest rates. So how would you envision being able to get something that looked like a soft landing vis-a-vis both the fiscal deficit and the Fed's balance sheet? Not to give you a hard question for you.
I mean, honestly, we just have to grow our way out of this. we need the kind of shot in the arm that we had in the New Deal. We need to put people to work. We need to have that long spoken about infrastructure program where God knows we have infrastructure in this country that's hurting. And if we can put people back to work, if we can reverse the layoffs in the public sector, then we could have a soft landing. But you can't turn on and off the Fed's buying and deaccessioning. That has to come, frankly, at the end rather than at the beginning, in my view. And I think that's the view of most economists.
You know, you talked in your daily reports, and obviously there's some front pages of the papers as well, about the stimulus being deadlocked, and Nancy Pelosi's fight with Wolf Blitzer yesterday. Several of the questions that have come, ask about the political dysfunction. And since you and I have been in Washington since the mid-1970s, and we've seen just about everything. Again, if you were to go into the White House, do you see any prospect? Let's say the Democrats do sweep, just make it easy in terms of the situation. How would you advise President Biden about how to move things ahead, given what's happened, the last number of years?
If you're Nancy Pelosi, what you're looking at is what happened in 2008, when the Bush administration wanted serious aid for the economy and got it with overwhelming Democratic support. And then when Obama came in, the Republicans said, no, the deficit is the bigger problem. And the reason that we had such a slow recovery is because we undersized the stimulus. So I think she is predicting that if Biden wins and or the Democrats take the Senate, that Republicans will again be enamored of lowering the deficit at the expense of stimulus. And therefore, if you accept a stimulus package or an aid, it's not really stimulus, if you accept an aid package that doesn't deal with the enormous layoffs of teachers and firefighters and police and every other kind of state and local employee, you'll never get that. And without getting that, you won't have a real recovery. And so I think she is saying we're ready to compromise, but not at the expense of no assistance in sectors where we need it. And I think she's betting that the president will come toward her, which he is, but Republicans in the Senate probably won't support that. So I think as a practical matter, it's possible that we get something before the election. I think if the political landscape changes, I think we'll see what I would consider to be adequate and appropriately targeted stimulus. And I think that's why you're seeing the markets react favorably to a blue wave, where you might imagine that market participants wouldn't like an all-Democratic government. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is how many people are saying, look, let's just give this to the other party as a whole and see if they can do something, because our government has a divided government, which I've always liked. But people are saying, I think with some reason, that it doesn't work. Not right now.
Touch one other related field, which again is in your report today, about Ohio Wesleyan University doing massive budget cuts and massive restructuring of their academic offerings. One of the areas that I'm a trustee at Union College, as Mike mentioned, so I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I know you've done the same at Harvard. What does this do to higher education going forward. There's going to be
Yeah.
a fall off in school-age population that is tied to the last recession. So there was a big drop in the birth rate in 2008 through 2012. We're going to start seeing that in 2025, 2026 in colleges, let alone the impact of technology and now the issue of the economy and the pandemic. What do you see for higher education? What are the options there, over the next few years?
So I make a couple of observations. Number one, I think public universities' budgets are being cut. Those are among the state and local layoffs that I've described. So that's one big chunk of strain on our higher education system. Number two, in general, people are tightening their belts, and one of the things they do when they do that is they tighten their belts on things like tuition, and as a consequence of the higher expenses for private universities and the lower income, because people have deferred their admissions, people are not showing up on campus, obviously, and those fees are not being paid. The bottom quartile of schools, I think, won't make it. I mean, I think the top schools are taking from the next tier is taking from the next tier, and the next tier after that is going to evaporate, in my view. We're going to have a greatly consolidated higher education sector. And I think there's a ton of rethinking going on about the degree to which one needs to be on campus and for what. You clearly need to be on campus if you're in a lab, but if you're taking a 1-year master's of education, I don't know that you need to be on campus for that. So there's a lot of thinking going on, Bill, about what we are learning from online learning and what really needs to be done on campus and what doesn't.
Yeah, and then let's expand that, Jamie, to beyond higher education. As we've all said, and all of us who are on this call today, we do know how to function remotely, mostly because we already have connections and we know how to work a room. We know people listen to us because we are who we are. As I said in my remarks, I'm really worried about the younger generation, which I can't believe, but somehow you and I both ended up around 70 years old, which is also hard to believe, but that's okay.
You are, I'm not.
I know you have another few months, but that's okay. And you don't.
I am actually 70 years old, Bill. I really am. I just don't feel it. Go ahead.
Any thoughts on how we do assist the next generation that is coming out of school, doesn't get the benefit of sitting in your office the way that they were 6 months ago, and sitting in Lloyd's office the way I did 45 years ago, and learned a ton by just sitting there quietly and watching him work his magic. How do we help them? And then more generally, what is the future for office work? What's your sense? Amazon obviously, I'm sure, is talking about this a lot. What is the sense about working from home, and whether that this is a permanent realignment?
I think that the jury is out on your second question, which I'll return to in a sec. I've written a lot, though, about the impact of working remotely on people who are just entering the workplace. It's hard. And I mentioned, I think, in this morning's note that McKinsey has a study on this. It interviewed 800 business executives who said that some quotient of their workers, their white collar workers, would probably permanently be able to work only a couple of days a week in the office. If you look at and I also mentioned that there was some purloined Google study that was mentioned in a publication called The Information, which covers the tech industry. And it said that the youngest engineers are having trouble with their productivity in their own estimation, working remotely, managing their time, getting questions answered in the ways that would have been done informally. We in the law firm are spending a ton of time checking in with the younger lawyers, making sure that the teams are as cohesive as you can make them when you're operating on a screen. But it is hard. I mean, my contacts with my clients are pre-existing. Now, I have had one or two significant matters come in where I haven't known the people before, but imagine yourself as a salesman in a company that operates worldwide. Your senior people know all of their customer contacts. If you're new, you don't know nobody, and you're introducing yourself on a screen. So I think it's going to be hard. I don't think that kind of in-person contact will go away. I think it's quite necessary. And in the meantime, we have to just do what we can to be immediate. Now, there's some ways in which these screens are actually helpful. So a friend of mine who teaches says, there are no backbenchers on Zoom. Everybody's got the same size box. And the meetings I've had we use WebEx if you do it right, you are reaching people and provoking conversation, but it's way harder. It is way harder. So it may be a long answer, but I think that we need to tend very affirmatively to the younger people.
Last topic, the easiest one, China. You kindly sponsored me to join the Council on Foreign Relations a few years ago. And I can tell you the shift even in the last few years in the conversation at a place like CFR and elsewhere, where it used to be fairly balanced between people saying, well, that things will change and we just need to understand what the Chinese are doing. The last year, even at the CFR, it is totally, how do we control China? How do, a sense that we got taken in terms of the WTO and the theft of intellectual property, tremendous concern about President Xi. The decoupling seems to me that it's going to happen irrespective of who wins, and that I'm not sure I see a tremendous difference, at least in the stated policies between the Democrats and the Republicans on China. What's your sense?
I think you're totally right about that. We put out, my partner, Stephen Preston, who was general counsel of the CIA and DOD, and I put out a paper on China decoupling. Anybody who wants it, just let us know. It's actually, it lands just where you land, Bill. I mean, I have been part of the intelligence and national security community for pretty much my entire career, and I have not been sanguine about China for a very long time. I mean, they have robbed our intellectual property. They are not honest. They have a very robust intelligence gathering program in the United States to this day. They do not abide by their international agreements. They are working there as we withdrew from international organizations, as we withdrew aid, they have filled the void. And geopolitically, it's been a disaster for us, which we are waking up to when, the water is up to here. I don't see any significant difference except for the rhetorical excesses of President Trump versus the more measured way of speaking of a Joe Biden in policy. they are a competitor. They are a real threat to us, and we need to check them in innumerable ways, which is what the paper I mentioned is about. So if you are dependent upon China for your supplies, which frankly a huge chunk of U.S. industry is, if you are dependent upon China for your sales, which another very significant chunk of our economy is, you need to really think through how you're going to manage the next 4, 5, 10 years of economic and geopolitical warfare.
Do one last question, and then I'll turn it over to Melissa, who I know wants to wrap up. Move slightly west to Russia. How do you see, again, with the two administrations, our relations with Russia and NATO? Do they change? NATO, I think, does change a lot if the Democrats win.
Both will change. I mean, we need NATO, and the destruction of NATO over the last 4 years has been just mind-blowing. NATO is a really important part of our national security approach, and it's to use the military term, it's a force multiplier, and it's become a force divider in the last 4 years. I know I'm showing my Democratic colors here, but I think it's hard to explain. It is true that we have been the largest contributor in terms of a percentage of our budget that is spent on our military, but there are lots of ways in which our European colleagues and others have been supportive of NATO and our presence abroad, our ability to project forward into a theater that could be a check on Russia is greatly diminished. As to Russia, I mean, as a bipartisan report of our Senate said, they undermined our election, and they put a very strong thumb in nefarious ways on the scale for the election of Donald Trump and the defeat of Hillary Clinton. I think their goal was to weaken a Clinton administration's. I don't think they expected actually to be able to install a president, but I think they were delighted with the result. I think that will change, and for the better. I mean, they're up to no good, and we don't get anything from them. Unlike the Chinese, which has an economy that we need, and so we need to get to a place that works for us. There's not much that we get from Russia except mayhem. You might ask how I feel about Russia.
I think I will leave it at that. I think on behalf of all 170 of us, thank you for an hour of your time. It's even a larger contribution to the foundation and all of us than our hourly contribution, 1 hour contributions to the foundation, Jamie. And you are a more than worthy successor to our joint mentor, Lloyd Cutler and Jack Miller. So thank you so much for your service to the country and for your time today.
Well, Bill, it is my pleasure to have been here, to have listened to the first part of this meeting, and also especially to honor you. I mean, you yourself are a mentor to so many. You are a lawyer's lawyer. You are a wonderful counselor and a wonderful friend, and nobody could deserve this award more than you. So I'm totally happy to be here to celebrate with you. Thank you.
Thank you.